Thank you. I yield back.
Yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Durham, you were appointed by whom? Who recommended you and appointed you?
As the special counsel?
No, as the U.S. Attorney.
As U.S. Attorney. It was President Trump at the time, with 2 Democratic senators from Connecticut supporting the nomination.
Mr. Trump appointed you. You believe Mr. Trump has pretty good judgment on people, and their abilities, and their character?
I'm not going to characterize Mr. Trump or my thoughts about Mr. Trump.
Mr. Barr appointed you special counsel, is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Trump has called Mr. Barr a gutless pig, a coward, and a rhino. Which of those is correct, which isn't?
In my experience, none of those are correct.
So Mr. Trump isn't that good of an expert on character and judging people. In your opinion, he isn't, because he's none of those. He's not a gutless pig, but Trump says he is.
Yeah, that's outside the scope of my report.
Also outside the scope of your report, apparently. Also outside of the scope of your report was apparently the meeting at Trump Tower between the Russians and the Trump boys, where they talked about allegedly adoptions, but we know it was really about sanctions. How was that outside of your report?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow that.
Meeting at the Trump Tower, Russian attorney came to Trump, and Donald Trump Jr. was just wonderful, wonderful. We love it, we love it. Russian decisions to interact with the Trump campaign and influence the actions of the campaign, allegedly for adoption law, but really for sanctions relief. The FBI came up with that, did they not?
A meeting took place at Trump Towers on June 9th. The lure, as I understand it, was that there was information, derogatory information on Clinton that was going to be provided. They met, and as I believe in a HPSY report, the HPSY report fully laid that out, that the discussion then at Trump Towers was about adoption, not about anything relating to Mrs. Clinton.
It was totally about sanctions. You're trying to get rid of the Magnitsky Law. Adoptions is a ruse. Should you not have gone and looked into that and seen what the Russians were wanting in return for that? Because that's the biggest thing Putin wanted at the time, was to get Trump to relieve his people of Magnitsky sanctions.
I think that Director Mueller investigated that, and I believe one of your House committees explored that. That was outside the scope of what we were looking at.
And it was outside the scope of your authority to look at Klimnik and Manafort meeting and exchanging polling data?
Was that out? I'm sorry, I'm not following your question.
Manafort. You remember Manafort, the crook that managed the campaign for nothing but got tons of money from different Russian people over the years that y'all pardoned? Mr. Barr later helped him with the commutation or pardon, I think a pardon. Manafort.
I know who Mr. Manafort is.
Yeah. He met with Klimnik, and they discussed polling data. You don't know about that?
No, that Mr. Klimnik met with a lot of people, including people.
He met with Manafort and discussed polling data. Do you not know about that?
I'm aware of that.
All right. Why did you then not think it was a good idea for you to look into it and see if the FBI wasn't correct in that there was collusion, a connection between Russia and the Trump campaign to elect Trump?
My assignment was to look at the conduct of the intelligence community agencies, not to conduct some separate investigation that was done by the House or that's done by the Senate or was done by Director Mueller.
You don't think that if the intelligence communities, the FBI, and others came up with this information and did good work, that should be part of your balanced report?
Yeah, well, I'm not following your question. I apologize.
Well, I've tried to follow your report. Mr. Donald Trump Jr. would have called it a nothing burger. Mm-hmm. You got no convictions. You got nothing. It was all set up to hurt the Mueller report, which was correct and was redacted, to hurt the Bidens and to help Trump. And you were a part of it. You have a good reputation. You had a good reputation. That's why the 2 Democrats supported you. But the longer you hold on to Mr. Barr and this report that Mr. Barr gave you as special counsel, your reputation will be damaged. As everybody's reputation who gets involved with Donald Trump is damaged, he's damaged goods, There's no good dealing with him because you will end up on the bottom of a pyre. I yield back the balance of my time.
Sure.
Can we presume the gentleman's undecided on how he feels about the former president?
Gentlemen, the witness can respond.
Yeah, my concern about my reputation is with the people who I respect and my family and my Lord. And I'm perfectly comfortable with my reputation with them, sir.
Well said. God bless you. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Mr. Durham, thank you for being here today. On October 3rd, 2016, the FBI met with Christopher Steele, who confessed to relying heavily on a Russian national living in Washington, D.C. as a subsource. That subsource was later identified as Igor Danchenko. Steele not only used Danchenko to create the dossier, but according to your report, Steele was unable to corroborate any of the substantial allegations made in the dossier. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Even after the FBI offered Steele $1 million if somehow he could actually follow through and underscore some of those specific items. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the FBI interviewed Danchenko and Steele's subsource, the Steele subsource, for 3 days, from January 24th through January 26th of 17. However, according to your report, Danchenko could not provide any evidence corroborating allegations contained in the dossier. Is that correct?
That's a fact.
And yet the FBI paid Danchenko $220,000 during his time as a confidential human source. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did the FBI propose making continued future payments to Danchenko totaling more than $300,000?
That's correct.
Danchenko becomes a confidential human source, then enlists his own subsource, Charles Dolan, as was brought up earlier, who was a Democrat operative and had previously served as an advisor to Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign. Is that your understanding? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did Danchenko ever disclose his relationship with Charles Dolan to the FBI that you're aware of?
He did not during the interviews that were conducted in January. Subsequently, he was specifically asked in an interview with his then handler, do you know Charles Dolan? You listen to the recording. He hesitates for some awkward period of time and then says, yes, I know who Dolan is. So he acknowledged knowing Mr. Dolan.
Do you think it had anything to do with he was simply worried that disclosing a Democrat operative as a subsource might jeopardize the whole payroll deal that the FBI had set up with them?
And we lay these facts out as we do other facts in the report and leave it to others to draw the reasonable conclusions or inferences from those facts.
Very good. Of the hundreds of individuals who the FBI interviewed through the course of Crossfire Hurricane and Miller's special counsel investigation, this came up earlier, was Charles Dolan ever interviewed by the FBI?
He was not.
Do you have any insight as to why the FBI would not interview him or overlook such a high-profile person in this whole investigation?
That's something of a mystery. Going back to October 3rd, according to the ALAT, the Assistant Legal Attaché for the Bureau, when he first, going back to July 5th, when he first met with Steele, Steele had indicated to him at the time that HC was aware of what Steele was doing. When the Bureau went back to interview Steele on October 3rd about matters relating to Crossfire Hurricane, Steele, in fact, had provided the Bureau with Dolan's name as somebody who might have information relating to Trump, but he was never interviewed. So yeah, I don't know why they never interviewed Trump. I'm sorry, why they didn't interview Mr. Dolan, but they didn't. The explanation that was given to the intelligence analyst who's referred to in the report essentially was that that would be outside the scope of their mission, outside their role.
Very good. You note in your report on page 168 that one of the analysts of the Miller team was told, quote, to cease all research and analysis related to Dolan, unquote. This was the same analyst who, according to your footnote, prepared a timeline in the event she were later interviewed about her role on the Miller Special Counsel investigation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Igor Danchenko had also relied on other subsources, namely Olga Galkina and Sergei Milin. When the FBI interviewed those two subsources, were either of them able to verify the information in the Steele dossier?
Well, speaking first to Milian, we interviewed Milian as well. He's outside the country. He claims to fear for his safety and whatnot, but he adamantly denied ever talking to Danchenko or providing any information akin to what was in the Steele reporting. In fact, he is a supporter of President Trump, which made it seem highly unlikely that he would be providing derogatory information to somebody he had never met or spoken to. So that's as to Milian. With respect to Ms. Galkina, Ms. Galkina was somebody who provided some information to Danchenko, provided some information to Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm out of time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
Tất cả các bạn, chào mừng các bạn đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay mình sẽ hướng dẫn cho các bạn tô màu bức tranh cầu trượt. Mời các bạn hãy cùng đón xem hết video của mình nhé.